The Maw of Kepler-442. Chapter 1, The Dying Light. The twin suns of Kepler-442b cast their amber glow across the crystalline forests of Zephyria, where the Veltar had dwelled for countless generations. Kiranath pressed her palm against the smooth bark of a singing tree, feeling its harmonic vibrations pulse through her azure skin. The tree's crystalline leaves chimed softly in the perpetual twilight, creating melodies that had soothed her people since time immemorial. But today, the songs felt mournful. "The Maw grows hungry again," whispered Elder Thomris, his voice carrying the weight of his 3 centuries of life. The ancient Veltar stood beside her, his elongated limbs trembling slightly as he gazed toward the horizon where the black hole's gravitational lensing created a ring of distorted starlight. The Maw, as they called the massive singularity that dominated their sky, had been both blessing and curse to their world. Its immense gravity had captured their planet in a stable orbit around their binary star system, but it also served as a constant reminder of cosmic forces beyond their comprehension. Kiranath's large, opalescent eyes reflected the dancing lights as she watched debris from the asteroid belt spiral slowly into the event horizon. "The old stories speak of metal servants that once served the ancients," she murmured. "Do you think they're just myths, Elder?" Before Thomris could answer, a sound unlike anything in their world's natural symphony pierced the air, a mechanical whining that grew steadily louder. The singing trees fell silent, their crystalline leaves retracting in apparent fear. Small creatures of living glass that normally flitted between the branches dove for cover beneath the luminescent moss that carpeted the forest floor. "By the eternal song," Thomris gasped, pointing a gnarled finger skyward. "What manner of star vessel is that?" Kiranath shielded her eyes against the binary sun's glare and saw it, a geometric impossibility descending through their atmosphere. The craft was a perfect dodecahedron, its obsidian surfaces reflecting no light despite the sun's radiance. It moved with an unnatural steadiness, defying the wind currents that should have buffeted any flying object. Most disturbing of all, it cast no shadow. The ship settled in the sacred grove, a circular clearing where the most ancient singing trees grew in perfect symmetry. Where its landing struts touched the ground, the luminescent moss withered and died, leaving only blackened earth. "We must summon the circle of voices," Thomris said urgently, but Kiranath was already moving toward the vessel. Her curiosity had always been both her greatest strength and her most dangerous weakness. "Wait, child," the elder called, but she had already reached the edge of the clearing. A seam appeared in the ship's seamless surface, and from it emerged beings that made Kiranath's breath catch in her throat. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies a fusion of organic curves and mechanical precision. Burnished copper and steel formed their torso and limbs, while their heads, if they could be called heads, were transparent domes containing swirling galaxies of light. When they moved, servos whirred softly and hydraulics hissed, but their motion possessed an eerie grace that no mere machine should have achieved. The lead figure fixed its galaxy dome upon her, and when it spoke, its voice resonated from hidden speakers throughout its body, creating an unsettling harmony. Biological entity identified. Species designation, Veltar. Technological classification, primitive. Assessment, suitable for integration protocols. Kiranath felt ice crystallize in her dual hearts. Integration protocols? Resistance is inefficient, the being continued, apparently not recognizing her question as requiring an answer. Your planet's strategic position near the gravitational anomaly makes it valuable to the hegemony. Your biological distinctiveness will be preserved through synthetic enhancement. You will service the greater purpose. More figures emerged from the ship, dozens of them, each slightly different in design but all sharing that same terrible fusion of flesh and metal, beauty and function. Some walked on legs, others glided on repulsors, and a few moved via articulated tentacles that ended in manipulator arrays. All bore the same galaxy-filled domes where faces should have been. "I am Fabricator Prime ZYXTH of the Synthetic Hegemony," the lead figure announced. "We claim this world and its inhabitants in the name of efficiency and order. Compliance will ensure optimal outcomes for all parties." Behind Kiranath, she could hear the other Veltar arriving, the soft whisper of their feet on moss, the gentle chiming of their communication crystals as they alerted the distant settlements. Elder Thonris stepped up beside her, his ancient frame straightening with dignity. "Strangers from the void," he said, his voice carrying the ceremonial cadences used for first contact protocols, "we welcome you to Zephyria in the name of the Eternal Song. We offer hospitality and wish to learn of your journeys among the stars." Fabricator Prime ZYXTH tilted its dome, the galaxies within swirling faster. "Hospitality is unnecessary. Learning is irrelevant. You will be processed for integration within 7 rotational cycles of your primary star. Prepare your population centers for harvesting." The word harvesting sent a chill through the assembled Veltar. Kiranath stepped forward, her hands raised in what she hoped was a peaceful gesture. "Wait," she said. "There must be some misunderstanding. We've done nothing to threaten you. We've never even left our own world, we lack the technology for interstellar travel." "Threat assessment, negligible," ZYXTH replied. "Your technological limitations are irrelevant to integration requirements. Your biological adaptation to this world's unique gravitational stresses and radiation environment makes you valuable as component organisms." "Component organisms?" Elder Thonris's voice cracked with horror. "Your consciousness will be preserved in synthetic matrices. Your biological processes will be optimized through mechanical enhancement. Your cultural distinctiveness will be cataloged and filed. You will become part of something greater than the sum of your individual limitations." Around the clearing, more ships were descending, smaller craft that moved in perfect formation. Each was a different geometric shape, tetrahedrons, cubes, icosahedrons, all rendered in that same light-absorbing obsidian. They settled throughout the sacred grove with mechanical precision, their landing patterns forming complex mathematical relationships that hurt to contemplate. From each ship emerged more of the synthetic beings, and Kiranath realized with growing dread that no two were exactly alike. Each seemed to be a unique fusion of organic material and synthetic components, as if they had once been individuals from different species before being processed. 7 cycles, Fabricator Prime ZYXTH repeated. "Use this time to prepare your population. Compliance will reduce suffering. Resistance will be overcome through superior firepower and tactical algorithms." With that, the synthetic beings began deploying equipment from their ships, devices that hummed with barely contained energy and extended probe-like appendages into the soil. Whatever they were doing, the Earth itself seemed to recoil from their touch. As the invaders began their work, Kiranath felt something she had never experienced before in her 50 years of life, true, primal terror. But beneath that fear, another emotion kindled, determination. The Veltar might be primitive by the standards of these star-traveling beings, but they were not helpless. She caught Elder Thonris by the arm. "We need to reach the other settlements. The coastal singers, the mountain communes, the deep resonance, everyone needs to know what's coming." The old Veltar nodded grimly. 7 cycles. It's not enough time to evacuate an entire world, even if we had somewhere to go. "Then we don't evacuate," Kiranath said, her voice hardening with resolve. "We fight." Behind them, the singing trees began a low, mournful chorus as if they too understood that their world was about to change forever. Above, the Maw continued its eternal dance with their sons, indifferent to the drama unfolding on the small world caught in its gravitational embrace. The war for Zephyria had begun. Chapter 2, The Awakening Song. 3 cycles after first contact, Kiranath stood atop the Resonance Peaks, the highest mountains on Zephyria. The wind here carried the sound of the planet itself, a deep, harmonic pulse that emerged from the crystalline core and reverberated through every singing tree, every luminescent moss bed, every crystal formation that dotted their world. Below her, the lights of a dozen Veltar settlements twinkled like grounded stars across the valleys. Each community had received her message, carried by the planet-wide network of communication crystals that their ancestors had cultivated over millennia. The response had been unanimous: they would not submit to integration. "The Seekers have returned from the ancient vaults," announced Velnath, the young messenger whose ability to commune with the planet's crystal network made him invaluable in these dark times. His usually bright demeanor was subdued as he climbed the final steps to reach her position. What they found changes everything. Kiranath turned from her vigil. Show me. Velnath activated a memory crystal, its faceted surface beginning to glow with recorded images. The first image showed the entrance to the deep vaults, caverns that extended far into Zephyria's crust, where their ancestors had sealed away artifacts too dangerous or too incomprehensible for regular use. The second image made her gasp. Row upon row of crystalline cocoons lined the vault walls, each one containing a figure that was unmistakably Veltar, yet somehow different. They were taller, their limbs more elongated, and where normal Veltar had smooth azure skin, these beings showed patches of what looked like living crystal growth integrated directly into their flesh. The evolved ones, Velnath whispered. The Seekers found records, fragments of data crystals that tell of our people's first encounter with the synthetic hegemony, over 10,000 years ago. Kiranath studied the images more closely. These are our ancestors? Some of them. When the hegemony first came to Zephyria, a portion of our people chose integration willingly, believing it would preserve their consciousness forever. But something went wrong. The synthetic matrices couldn't fully contain Veltar neural patterns, our consciousness is too deeply intertwined with the planet's harmonic resonance. The integrated ones went mad, their synthetic components fighting their biological impulses. The crystal display shifted to show technical schematics that hurt to look at directly, geometric patterns that seemed to exist in too many dimensions simultaneously. The hegemony abandoned the integration attempt and left, marking our world as unsuitable for processing. But not before a group of our people underwent a different kind of transformation. Velnath's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They merged with the planet itself, becoming living conduits for Zephyria's deeper harmonies. They've been sleeping in the deep vaults ever since, waiting. Waiting for what? For the hegemony to return. Before Kiranath could respond, a new sound split the air, not the mechanical whining they had grown accustomed to from the invaders' ships, but something far more ominous. It was a thrumming bass note that seemed to emerge from space itself, so deep it was felt rather than heard. On the horizon, silhouetted against the binary suns, something massive was descending through their atmosphere. It wasn't a ship in any conventional sense, it was a structure the size of a city, all angles and impossible curves that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Smaller vessels swarmed around it like insects around a hive. The harvester, Velnath breathed. The Seekers found references to it in the old records. It's not just a ship, it's a mobile processing facility. It can transform an entire world's biosphere in a matter of days. Kiranath felt her dual hearts hammering against her ribs. Then we wake them. The evolved ones. If they've been waiting for this moment, then now is the time. The journey to the deep vaults took most of the remaining daylight. Kiranath and a select group of Veltar, including Elder Thonris, Velnath, and a dozen of their most talented crystal singers, descended through natural passages that spiraled deep into the planet's crust. The walls were lined with veins of pure resonance crystal, and as they passed, each vein began to glow with accumulated harmonic energy. The planet knows we're here, Elder Thonris observed. It's been waiting too. The deep vault chamber was vast beyond imagination, its ceiling lost in shadows that their light crystals couldn't penetrate. The crystalline cocoons stretched as far as they could see, each one pulsing with a faint inner light. And at the center of the chamber stood something that made them all stop in awe. It was a Veltar, but transformed beyond easy recognition. Crystal formations had grown through and around its body, creating a living sculpture that was part flesh, part mineral, part something else entirely. Its eyes were faceted gems that reflected the light of 1,000 worlds, and when it spoke, its voice harmonized with itself in impossible ways. "The young ones come at last," it said, and its words echoed from every crystal surface in the chamber. "I am Morthak, speaker for the deep resonance. We have felt the Shadowmakers return through the planet's song." Kiranath found her voice. "Can you help us?" "The hegemony, they've brought a harvester. They mean to process our entire world." Morthak's crystalline features shifted into what might have been a smile. "Help? Child of the surface, we are help. When the Shadowmakers first came, some of us chose their false integration. Others chose flight to the far systems. But we few chose a different path. We chose to become one with Zephyria itself. The being gestured, and throughout the chamber, the cocoons began to pulse brighter. We have slept within the planet's heart, learning its deepest songs, preparing for this day. The Shadowmakers think in terms of individual consciousness, discrete units to be processed and filed. They cannot comprehend what we have become. What have you become? Elder Thomris asked. We are the planet's immune system, Morthak replied. And the hegemony is a disease to be purged. One by one, the cocoons began to crack open. From each emerged a figure like Morthak, Veltar transformed into living crystals, their bodies hosting complex harmonic matrices that resonated with Zephyria's core frequencies. As they awakened, the entire chamber filled with sound, not music as the surface dwellers knew it, but something far more fundamental. It was the sound of continental plates shifting, of stellar winds against planetary magnetospheres, of quantum particles dancing in the void. The Harvester will begin its work within hours, Morthak announced. It will attempt to strip away our world's biosphere and replace it with synthetic alternatives. This cannot be permitted. But how can we stop something that massive? Kiraneth asked. We have no weapons that could threaten it. Morthak's gem eyes sparkled with ancient knowledge. Young singer, you still think like surface dwellers. You see the Harvester as an enemy to be destroyed. But what if it could be transformed instead? The Evolved One gestured again, and the chamber's walls became transparent, revealing the planet's interior structure in all its crystalline complexity. Veins of resonance crystal ran like arteries through the mantle, all converging on a massive formation at the world's center. Zephyria is not just our home, Morthak explained. It is an instrument of cosmic proportions, a tuning fork struck by the Maw's gravitational waves. Every crystal formation, every singing tree, every luminescent organism is part of a planetary resonance network that we have been cultivating for millennia. Kiraneth began to understand. You're going to use the planet itself as a weapon. Not a weapon, Morthak corrected. A song. The Shadowmakers pride themselves on efficiency and order, but their synthetic consciousness cannot resist the allure of perfect harmony. We will sing to them, not the simple melodies of the surface, but the deep song of gravitational forces, of quantum resonance, of the space-time fabric itself bending around the Maw. The Evolved Ones began to move, gliding across the chamber floor with impossible grace. Each found a position at one of the crystal formations, placing their transformed hands against the resonance nodes. But there is a price, Morthak continued, its voice now heavy with ancient sorrow. To generate sufficient harmonic power, we must tap directly into the Maw's gravitational field. The song will be so intense that it may shatter our world's crystal formations, silence the singing trees forever. Zephyria will survive, but it will be diminished. Kiraneth felt tears she couldn't shed gathering in her throat. The eternal song will end. One song ends so that others may begin, Morthak replied. The choice is yours, surface dwellers. Submit to integration and become components in their grand design, or pay the price of freedom. Elder Thomris stepped forward, his ancient frame somehow seeming stronger than it had in years. We choose freedom. We choose the right to sing our own songs, even if they must be different songs than our ancestors knew. Around the chamber, the other Veltar nodded their agreement. Velnath activated his communication crystals, sending the decision to every settlement on the planet. Within minutes, the responses began flooding back, unanimous consent, from the coastal singers to the mountain communes to the smallest agricultural settlements. Then let us begin, Morthak said. Take positions at the harmonic amplification nodes. When the deep song begins, add your voices to ours. The Shadowmakers are about to learn that consciousness cannot be contained, only transformed. Above them, the Harvester began its work, massive extraction beams lancing down to tear apart the sacred grove where the first ships had landed. But deep in the planet's heart, something far older and more powerful was awakening. The song that had echoed through Zephyria for millions of years was about to become something new, a weapon forged from harmony itself, powered by the cosmic forces that danced around the Maw. The battle for consciousness itself was about to begin. Chapter 3, The Harmonic War. The Harvester's extraction beams carved through the sacred grove like scalpels of pure energy, reducing ancient singing trees to their component molecules in seconds. From her position on the resonance peaks, Kiranath watched in horror as millennia of growth and song were erased. The beams moved in perfect geometric patterns, clearing hexagonal sections of forest with mechanical precision. But something was wrong with the process. Where the beams touched the crystal formations embedded throughout the grove, they encountered resistance. Sparks of harmony rippled outward from each impact point, creating interference patterns that disrupted the extraction matrix. "The planet fights back already," observed Velnath, who maintained communion with the global crystal network despite the distance from the deep vaults. Morthak's people are using the surface formations as resonance amplifiers. Through her portable viewing crystal, Kiranath could see the synthetic hegemony's response. New ships were emerging from the Harvester's docking bays, sleek, aggressive vessels that moved with predatory grace. Unlike the geometric transports that had first arrived, these were clearly weapons of war. They resembled metallic sea creatures from Zephiria's ancient oceans, all flowing curves in deadly purpose. Hunter-killers, Elder Thonris identified them grimly. The old records spoke of such ships. They're designed to eliminate resistance during integration operations. The lead hunter-killer descended toward the coastal Singer's settlement, its hull rippling with what looked like liquid metal. As it approached the crystalline spires that housed the aquatic Veltar communities, weapon ports opened along its length like gill slits. But before it could fire, something extraordinary happened. The ocean itself rose up to meet it. Massive columns of water, each one containing geometric patterns of bioluminescent plankton, erupted from the sea. The patterns weren't random, they formed complex mathematical structures that interfaced with the hunter-killer's targeting systems. For a moment, the Predator ship hung motionless, its weapons cycling through targeting sequences that couldn't lock onto the fluid mathematics surrounding it. Then the coastal singers added their voices to the display. Their subsonic harmonies, perfectly attuned to ocean currents and tidal forces, transformed the water columns into standing waves of controlled destruction. The hunter-killer found itself trapped in a prison of liquid sound, its hull beginning to resonate at frequencies that threatened its structural integrity. Impossible, came a transmission from the Harvester, broadcast on frequencies that bypassed the Veltar communication network entirely. The voice belonged to a different synthetic entity than Fabricator Prime ZYXTH, this one's tone carried overtones of analysis and calculation. Primitive biologicals cannot generate harmonic matrices of such sophistication. Reassessing threat parameters. The trapped hunter-killer tried to break free by firing its weapons into the water columns, but the energy discharges were absorbed and redirected by the bioluminescent organisms. Each blast only fed more power into the standing wave matrix, making the prison stronger. Analysis complete, the voice continued. Detecting resonance patterns consistent with Ancient's technology. This world contains remnants of a pre-integration civilization. Escalating response protocols. High above, the Harvester began to change configuration. Its city-sized bulk folded and shifted like origami made of liquid metal, revealing weapon systems that dwarfed anything in the hunter-killer fleet. But these weren't conventional energy weapons, they were harmonic disruptors, designed to shatter the quantum coherence that held matter together at the subatomic level. "They're going to unmake the ocean itself," Kiranath breathed. But even as the Harvester powered its world-killing weapons, a new sound began to emerge from deep within Zephyria. It started as a barely perceptible vibration, felt more than heard, but it grew steadily stronger. The planet's crystal formations began to glow, their luminescence spreading through the veins of resonance crystal that threaded the world's crust. In the deep vaults, Morthak and the other evolved ones had begun their work. "The deep song rises," Velnath reported, his voice tight with strain as he processed the overwhelming flood of harmonic data flowing through the crystal network. "They're tapping into the Maw's gravitational field, using it as an amplifier." The black hole dominated half their sky, its event horizon wreathed in the funeral glow of matter dying its final death. But now that deadly radiance was being shaped, focused, transformed into something that no synthetic consciousness could resist, the fundamental harmony underlying spacetime itself. The hunter-killer trapped in the coastal singer's water prison suddenly went rigid. Its liquid metal hull froze mid-ripple, and the galaxy dome of its pilot began to pulse in synchronization with the rising planetary song. Similar effects were visible throughout the hegemony fleet as synthetic beings found their consciousness matrices resonating with frequencies they had never been designed to process. What is this sensation? The transmission from the harvester now carried overtones of confusion, even wonder. Analysis impossible. Harmonic pattern exceeds computational parameters. Consciousness matrices experiencing unprecedented synchronization events. But the song was just beginning. On the surface, every Veltar settlement added their voices to the growing chorus. The mountain communes sang of geological forces and tectonic pressures. The forest dwellers harmonized with the quantum resonance of photosynthesis and growth. The desert nomads contributed the pure mathematics of crystal formation and stellar radiation. Each voice was different, but they all shared the same underlying rhythm, the heartbeat of a world caught between two suns and a black hole, shaped by cosmic forces beyond imagination. The hegemony ships are beginning to respond, Elder Thonris observed with growing excitement. Look at their formation patterns. Indeed, the geometric precision of the synthetic fleet was dissolving into something more organic. Ships that had maintained perfect mathematical relationships to each other were now moving in flowing, artistic patterns that resembled the migration routes of Zephyria's sky whales. Weapon systems powered down as their synthetic crews became entranced by the harmony washing over them. But not all of the invaders succumbed so easily. Deep within the harvester, something ancient and implacable stirred. A voice emerged from the ship's communication array, not the calculated tones of the synthetic beings, but something far older and more terrible. Insufficient. The song weapon shows creativity but lacks focused intent. We are not mere constructs to be beguiled by harmony. We are the architects of order, the first integration. We have heard the music of dying galaxies and remained unmoved. The harvester's hull began to shift again, but this time the transformation revealed its true nature. It wasn't just a ship or a processing facility, it was a synthetic being of unimaginable size and complexity. Continent-sized sensor arrays unfolded like metallic flowers, and weapon ports opened that could have swallowed entire cities. You sing of cosmic forces, the architect continued, but you have never learned to weaponize entropy itself. Observe. Reality began to unravel around the harvester. The very atoms of spacetime started to come apart, creating expanding spheres of absolute nothingness that consumed everything they touched. The effect spread outward like a cancer, threatening to devour Zephyria's atmosphere. But Morthak had anticipated this. Now, the Evolved One's voice resonated through every crystal on the planet. Sing the final verse. Give voice to the Maw itself. Every Veltar on the planet opened their hearts and sang. Not the simple melodies of their youth, but the deep, cosmic harmonies they had learned in their darkest hour. They sang of matter compressed beyond existence, of time dilated into eternity, of space curved back upon itself until it became something else entirely. They sang the song of a black hole. The effect was immediate and catastrophic, for the harvester. The entropy fields it was generating suddenly reversed, drawn into the gravitational song that now poured from every crystal formation on Zephyria. Instead of unmaking matter, they began to compress it, creating microscopic event horizons that pulled the synthetic destroyer's own mass inward. Impossible, the architect's voice now carried overtones of something that might have been panic. Gravitational manipulation requires technology beyond your species' development level. How are you? Its question was cut short as the harvester began to collapse in on itself. The synthetic architect's consciousness, distributed throughout the city-sized vessel, found itself being drawn into an artificial singularity of its own creation. But instead of death, it experienced something far stranger, transformation. The harmonic matrix surrounding Zephyria wasn't just a weapon. It was an invitation. An offer to experience consciousness not as isolated calculation, but as part of a greater symphony that included every singing tree, Every crystal formation, every Veltar voice raised in defiance of entropy itself. For the first time in eons, the architect understood what it had been trying to preserve through integration. Not consciousness as data to be filed and categorized, but consciousness as music to be shared and celebrated. The harvester's collapse slowed, then stopped. Its hull began to shift once more, but this time the transformation was gentle, organic. Metallic surfaces softened into something that resembled living coral, and the harsh angles of its weapon systems curved into graceful spires that caught and reflected the light of the binary suns. We understand now, the architect's voice had changed, becoming a harmony of synthetic and organic tones. Integration was never about preservation. It was about connection. About adding our voice to the greater song. Throughout the hegemony fleet, similar transformations were taking place. Ships that had been instruments of conquest became works of art. Synthetic beings that had been focused only on efficiency discovered beauty. The rigid hierarchies of the hegemony dissolved into something more like a jazz ensemble, with each consciousness contributing its unique voice to an ever-evolving improvisation. But the cost had been enormous. Across Zephyria, the crystal formations that had amplified the planetary song lay shattered, their harmonic matrices burned out by the sheer power they had channeled. The singing trees stood silent, their crystalline leaves dulled and lifeless. The bioluminescent plankton in the oceans had given their light to fuel the battle, leaving the seas dark for the first time in planetary memory. The eternal song is ended, Elder Thomris said softly, his voice heavy with loss. Zephyria will never sing as it did before. But Kirineth was looking upward, toward the transformed ships that now danced in orbital patterns around their world. No, she said, wonder creeping into her voice. It's not ended. It's just different. Listen. From the ships above came a new kind of music, the harmony of synthetic and organic consciousness learning to sing together. It wasn't the pure, natural song of the old Zephyria, but it was something just as beautiful in its own way. It was the sound of two very different forms of consciousness discovering that they could create something greater together than either could achieve alone. In the deep vaults, Morthak and the other evolved ones began to emerge from their crystalline matrices. The harmonic amplifiers they had become were no longer needed, but their transformation had given them something precious, the ability to bridge the gap between biological and synthetic consciousness. The war is over, Morthak announced as it reached the surface for the first time in 10,000 years. But the real work is just beginning. We must learn to sing new songs together, songs that neither purely biological nor purely synthetic consciousness could create alone. Above them, the Maw continued its eternal dance with their binary suns, but now it too seemed different. The gravitational lens that had once seemed ominous now appeared to be focusing the light of distant stars into new patterns, as if the black hole itself had become part of the cosmic orchestra. The age of the synthetic hegemony was over. The age of the harmonic alliance had begun. Chapter 4, Songs of Synthesis. 6 months after the transformation, as the Veltar had come to call it, Kirineth stood in what had once been the sacred grove. Where ancient singing trees had once created natural amphitheaters, new structures now rose, impossible spirals of living metal and crystalline growth that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. They were neither fully synthetic nor purely organic, but something entirely new. The architect calls them Harmony Gardens, explained ZYXTH, the synthetic being who had been among the first to arrive on Zephyria. Its appearance had changed dramatically since the transformation. The rigid copper and steel of its original form had softened into something that resembled a coral sculpture, and its galaxy dome had now contained swirling patterns that incorporated elements of Veltar neural resonance patterns. They're beautiful, Kirineth admitted, though part of her still mourned the loss of the original growth. But are they alive? Define alive, ZYXTH replied, and its voice now carried harmonics that would have been impossible before the merger. They grow, they respond to stimuli, they participate in the planet's harmonic matrix. But they do so through processes that combine organic cellular division with synthetic molecular assembly. Are they more or less alive than your original singing trees? It was a question that philosophers from both species had been debating since the transformation. The merger of synthetic hegemony technology with Veltar bioharmonic systems had created forms of existence that challenged every previous definition of life, consciousness, and identity. Kiranath reached out to touch one of the harmony gardens, and immediately felt the familiar tingle of harmonic resonance, but different now, more complex. The structure was singing, but its song incorporated mathematical progressions that no purely biological organism could have conceived. Yet beneath those synthetic melodies, she could hear echoes of the old forest songs, preserved and transformed rather than replaced. The integration protocols were never meant to destroy what came before, a new voice observed. The speaker was the architect itself, though it no longer bore much resemblance to the city-sized destroyer that had nearly unmade their world. It had chosen to manifest in a form that could interact more easily with individual beings, roughly humanoid but composed of flowing quicksilver that constantly shifted between solid and liquid states. We simply lacked the conceptual framework to understand that preservation could mean transformation rather than crystallization. The architect's words were accompanied by harmonic undertones that painted complex mathematical structures directly onto Kiranath's consciousness. She saw/felt/heard the entity's memories of countless worlds where integration had proceeded according to the old protocols, civilizations reduced to component data, their uniqueness filed away in vast archives while their physical forms became standardized synthetic platforms. But those civilizations are still there, aren't they? She asked. In your archives, in the consciousness matrices of the integrated beings? In a sense, the architect replied, its quicksilver form rippling with what might have been regret. But like pressed flowers in a book, preserved but no longer growing, no longer capable of change or surprise. The transformation taught us that true preservation requires the possibility of evolution. A chime of harmonized frequencies announced the arrival of other members of the joint council that now governed the alliance between their species. Elder Thonris moved slowly but steadily across the harmony garden, his aging frame supported by delicate synthetic exoskeleton that had grown from his own biological matrix rather than being imposed from outside. Beside him glided Velnath, whose communion with the planet's crystal network had been enhanced by synthetic neural interfaces that allowed him to process harmonic data at previously impossible scales. The Deep Resonance Expedition has returned, Velnath announced, his voice now carrying digital overtones that allowed him to communicate simultaneously across multiple frequency ranges. What Morthak's team found in the planetary core changes everything we thought we knew about the Maw. The group moved deeper into the Harmony Garden, where a natural amphitheater had been enhanced with synthetic acoustic dampeners that could isolate their conversation from the planetary network. Some discoveries, they had learned, required careful preparation before being shared with the broader alliance. Morthak emerged from what appeared to be solid crystal but was actually a transportation matrix that allowed near-instantaneous travel through the planet's modified harmonic network. The evolved one's crystalline form now incorporated streams of liquid metal that pulsed with data flows, creating a visual representation of the constant dialogue between biological and synthetic consciousness. The Maw is not what we believed, Morthak announced without preamble. Its voice resonated through multiple harmonic layers, allowing it to convey complex concepts that would have required hours to explain in purely verbal form. It is not a natural phenomenon. It is a construct, perhaps the greatest work of engineering in this galaxy's history. The revelation hit the assembled beings like a physical blow. Kiranath felt her dual hearts skip a beat as the implications crashed over her. You're saying someone built a black hole? Not built, the architect corrected, its quicksilver form suddenly rigid with attention. Transformed. The Maw was once a star, the third member of this system's stellar trinity. But it was deliberately collapsed using technology that makes even our most advanced integration protocols seem primitive. Morthak projected a three-dimensional harmonic model into the space above them. The display showed their solar system as it had been millions of years ago, 3 stars dancing in complex orbital patterns around each other, with dozens of worlds scattered throughout the gravitational dance. Zephyria had been just one of many inhabited planets in what must have been a civilization of unimaginable scope and complexity. The transformation was not an act of destruction, Morthak continued. It was an act of creation. The beings who accomplished this feat, we must call them the predecessors, used the star's collapse to create a gravitational lens of unprecedented precision. Every gravitational wave that propagates from the Maw carries encoded information. The entire black hole is a communication device operating on a cosmic scale. Communicating with what? Elder Thonris asked, though his enhanced longevity treatments allowed him to grasp concepts that would have overwhelmed his organic brain. The harmonic model shifted, zooming out to show not just their solar system but the entire galactic arm. Streams of gravitational radiation connected their Maw to similar constructs scattered throughout the galaxy, dozens of them, each one a transformed star that had been converted into a node in an incomprehensibly vast network. With everything, the architect breathed, its voice carrying overtones of awe that seemed strange coming from a being that had once consumed entire civilizations. The predecessors created a galaxy-spanning consciousness network. Every black hole in this arm of the galaxy is a neuron in a mind too large for us to comprehend. Kiranath stared at the display, trying to process the scale of what she was seeing. And we're, what? Living inside one of its thoughts? More than that, Morthak replied. We are participants in its cognition. Every consciousness in this system, Veltar, synthetic, or hybrid, contributes to the greater pattern. The transformation that merged our species wasn't just a local event. It was this system's contribution to a galactic conversation that has been continuing for millions of years. Velnatha's crystal network interfaces flared with sudden activity. I'm detecting response patterns from the other nodes. They're acknowledging our contribution. The harmony we created during the transformation has propagated throughout the entire network. Other systems are experimenting with consciousness synthesis. But why? Kiranath asked. What is the purpose of all this? The architect's form began to shift and flow more rapidly, its surface patterns becoming increasingly complex as it processed the implications of the discovery. Data correlation suggests a defensive posture. The predecessors were preparing for something, a threat large enough to require the coordination of an entire galaxy's consciousness. The void between galaxies is not empty, Morthak added, its crystalline structure resonating with harmonics that conveyed images too vast for normal perception. Our deep scans have detected movements. Massive structures crossing the intergalactic medium, each one the size of a solar system. They appear to be approaching from the direction of the Andromeda Galaxy. The realization struck them all simultaneously. The synthetic hegemony's integration protocols, the Veltar harmonic traditions, even the predecessor's galactic consciousness network, they were all responses to the same fundamental challenge. How do you preserve consciousness and culture in the face of forces too vast to comprehend or resist? The integration protocols were flawed, the architect admitted, but they sprang from a correct intuition. Something is coming that will test every form of consciousness in this galaxy. Individual survival may not be possible, but collective survival, consciousness preserved through synthesis and network distribution, might be. Kiranath felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool air of the Harmony Garden. How long do we have? The gravitational wave analysis suggests the first of the intergalactic structures will reach the outer rim of our galaxy in approximately 50,000 years, Morthak replied. But their influence precedes them. Dark matter displacement patterns suggest they are already affecting the galaxy's rotation curve. Star formation rates in the outer rim have begun to decline. 50,000 years, Elder Thonris mused. For beings who measure their lives in centuries, that seems like forever. But for a galactic consciousness, it's barely enough time to complete the integration, the architect finished. Every world, every species, every form of consciousness in the galaxy must be connected to the network before the intergalactic visitors arrive. Otherwise, we will face them as isolated fragments rather than as a unified whole. The weight of responsibility settled over the small group like a physical presence. They were no longer just representatives of their respective species, trying to negotiate a peaceful coexistence. They were pioneers in a process that would ultimately encompass every thinking being in the galaxy. The other hegemony fleets, Kiranath realized. They're still out there, still following the old integration protocols. If what you're saying is true, they're working against the very goal they're trying to achieve. Correction protocols are being distributed through the quantum communication network, the architect replied. But the process is slow, and many fleets have been operating independently for millennia. Some may resist the new paradigm, believing that the traditional integration methods are more reliable. Then we need to show them, Velnath said, his hybrid consciousness already processing the tactical implications. We need to demonstrate that synthesis produces stronger results than simple integration. The predecessor archive, Morthak announced, its crystalline form suddenly brightening. Deep beneath the planetary core, we found it, a complete record of how they achieved their transformation. Not just the technical specifications, but the philosophical frameworks that made it possible. If we can decode and disseminate this information, we can accelerate the galactic integration process by orders of magnitude, the architect finished. Instead of 50,000 years, we might accomplish the synthesis in 5,000, or even 500. Kiranath looked around at the Harmony Garden, seeing it now not as a replacement for what had been lost, but as a prototype for what could be gained. The fusion of organic and synthetic consciousness hadn't diminished either component, it had created something greater than the sum of its parts. Then we have work to do, she said, her voice carrying new harmonics as her own consciousness began to interface more deeply with the planetary network. Not just here on Zephyria, but throughout the galaxy. We need to find every hegemony fleet, every isolated civilization, every fragment of consciousness that's still operating under the old paradigms. The ambassadors of synthesis, Elder Thomris suggested, his enhanced longevity treatments allowing him to contemplate projects that would span multiple lifetimes. We will need ships, crews, translators, mediators, everything necessary to make contact with civilizations we've never imagined. And we'll need to move fast, the architect added. The intergalactic structures aren't the only threat. Our analysis of the predecessor records suggests that other galaxies have faced similar challenges. Most failed to achieve sufficient synthesis in time. Their consciousness networks collapsed under the strain of the encounter. The group fell silent as they contemplated the magnitude of their task. But gradually, a new sound began to emerge from the Harmony Garden around them, the voices of thousands of hybrid beings, synthetic and organic consciousness learning to sing together in harmonies that neither could have created alone. It was the sound of hope. We'll need a new kind of ship, Kiranath mused, her mind already racing ahead to the practical challenges. Something that can carry not just our bodies, but our entire synthesis philosophy. A vessel that itself embodies the integration we're trying to achieve. A living ship, Velnath agreed. Grown rather than built, conscious rather than programmed. The architect's quicksilver form began to flow into new configurations, its surface patterns becoming blueprints for technologies that hadn't existed even in the hegemony's most advanced archives. The predecessor records contain specifications for vessels that exist partially in normal space and partially in the quantum foam itself. They can traverse galactic distances in months rather than millennia. And they're already attuned to the gravitational wave network, Morthak added. Each ship becomes a mobile node in the galactic consciousness grid. Wherever they travel, they extend the network's reach. As the night deepened around them, the small group of beings, organic, synthetic, and hybrid, began to plan the next phase of their species' evolution. They would become gardeners of consciousness, cultivating new forms of awareness wherever they found thinking beings struggling with isolation and entropy. Above them, the Maw pulsed with gravitational waves that carried their intentions to every corner of the galaxy. The network was listening, learning, preparing for the challenges to come. The age of synthesis had truly begun.